I'll build on the previous points that I've heard, and I will zoom out and zoom in on Romania and Europe as I go along. In my opinion, we are not in a good place, and as an industry participant in one of the industries that has over the last 20 years contributed probably a very significant part of capital invested in innovation and infrastructure. I have to say that I'm concerned at the pace at which Europe is losing its competitiveness. And the reason why this is happening, and we've been talking about it within our sector for years, technology evolution is a blessing for those that embrace it, but actually it's a curse for those that don't. And unfortunately, with the introduction of AI and the pace with which I see AI transforming the way we run our businesses, I think that the gap between the competitiveness of economies like the US and China and Europe is going to increase at an accelerated pace. So my first point is that we don't have the luxury of time anymore, and we need to act very quickly. And when I'm saying quickly, I'm really looking forward to updated industrial policies and decisions at Brussels level in the forthcoming year. Because if this doesn't happen, then I think that Europe will probably miss the boat. Already we see the contribution of Europe's GDP towards global GDP falling. We used to be at 25%, if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago. By 2028, the forecast will be that we will be, as a European Union, contributing 15% of the global GDP. So I am optimistic about the potential of technologies such as AI in what they can do on innovation, but I'm raising a word of caution that speed is of the essence. There are three things, in my opinion, that we need to focus on. Number one is regulation. So we have done a great job in Europe in over-regulating sectors to the point where we are stifling investment and innovation. And I'll give you two examples. Number one is my sector, so telecommunication sector in Europe in the 90s and early 2000s used to be the crown jewel, if you like, of communications globally, with valuations, investments, capital investments, and so on and so forth. At the moment, unfortunately, we're trailing the US and China by miles. And if you look at the valuations of European-based businesses, we have paid the price as a sector, and valuations of telecom operators have declined north of 50%, with the exception of one player, of which 80% of the value is driven by the US investment, not in Europe. So what's wrong with our sector? Regulation has intervened. I would say outdated regulation focusing just on market fragmentation and competitiveness on the one hand, and on the other hand, the demands and requests from governments and other market participants from us are all about increasing our level of investment. So on the one hand, we are being asked to put more money behind 5G, behind security, behind the highest vendors and so on and so forth. On the other hand, unfortunately, regulation does not allow the sector to consolidate. What's the result? We have more than 180 operators in Europe versus 3 operators in the US and 3 operators in China. That's one example. The second example, which I see and I fear, is regulation around AI and the stance that Europe is taking versus the US. When the US, it's a lot more about embracing, experimenting, and allowing the private sector to innovate on the back of AI. Europe, I think we're approaching AI from the point of view of something bad is going to happen, so we need to constrain it. So we're not in the right direction there, and I'm looking forward to seeing significant changes happening. My second point is around industrial strategy. What do I mean by industrial strategy? I see especially in the US as well as China, where certain bets are being placed. Let's call the bet on electric vehicles that China made years back, and how those let's say bets are being supported through and through, from government decisions to funneling of funds and so on and so forth. Contrast that with Europe, where we have the amazing opportunity of the recovery funds plus all the European funds, but unfortunately we have a very fragmented nationalistic industrial strategy. So every state is doing their own thing. Every ministry is supporting their own thing, So there's no commonality and there's no uniformity around how we spend that money. So the fear is that we're going to spend that money, in too many directions, across too many sectors, and we will not have an industrial story for Europe. My third point is around education. Now, we do have very strong educational institutions, not only in Romania, but in other European markets. But unfortunately, if I compare and contrast the way that educational institutions continue to work in Europe to a large extent, versus the ones that I've seen in the US, for example, they are unfortunately still far away from the private sector. Therefore, when we invest around innovation, unfortunately, the investments are not tightly linked, let's say, to what the companies want. So there is a big opportunity, if you like, to bring companies closer to educational institutions, but also the government close to both educational institutions as well as companies in creating what is a more consistent, let's say, production of brains, of people that are capable of onboarding themselves and working for companies and contributing from day one towards the strategy and the innovation of the private sector. So I think these are the 3 points that I wanted to raise. I will repeat that we need to act quickly. I'm really looking forward to seeing the results of studies that have been already in place. There's a study on competitiveness, there's a study of digitalization across Europe. So I'm really seeing on the back of those studies some critical decisions, and I urge for action fast.
Thanks very much, Achilleas.
One question for Mr. Kanaris. You talked a little bit about Europe and how it's losing pace. Maybe you could zoom in a little bit on what's happening on the Romanian market and the perspectives on the technology industry and the telco industry. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so I need to use my digital optimism as well then to answer this question. I'll start with the digital ecosystem in Romania. I think there's we've seen some statistics that we are far behind Western Europe and really far behind the US and China. I therefore think there's a big opportunity ahead of us. The good news is that the money is there, the government focus is there, so there is an increasing awareness of the fact that public digital transformation as well as private sector digital transformation will actually lead the way in us capturing the next innovation wave. The educational system is beginning to align around this, although we have a lot of work to do, and it's our obligation as private entities as well as the governments to, as I said, come up with a more concise and focused, let's say, strategy for the education system going forward. So I think if the elements are there and the focus and attention is there, I think we can actually start seeing significant progress being made in Romania. So I'm really looking forward, let's say, to extending the dialogue. I know that probably in the next 6 months the dialogue will stop. So towards the back end of the calendar year, post all of the elections, we are looking forward to continuing basically the path of this. We have a lot of distance to cover. But there are, I'm optimistic that with the elements that I've seen, if the right focus is there, we can make it. In terms of the sector, I think our sector in Romania suffers the problems of any other European market. I believe there are too many participants in the sector, which limits the ability of the participants to continue investing, on the one hand. And on the other hand, as we know, which is the history of the rest of Europe, we have to invest significantly. Europe trails in 5G. Real 5G in Europe is around 25%. In China is 95%, in the US is 90%. So we're really far behind. So what can we do in order to invest more as operators? Back to my regulation point, I think regulation needs to realize that actually the only way forward is scale. And therefore they should allow consolidations in the market, fewer players, bigger players able to continue investing in that front. And I think Romania is no exception. With you next to me, I'll be careful what I answer. No, I think continued sense of urgency. As I said, I see courageous moves. Ministry of Digitalization has been progressing really fast with, for example, the public digital transformation component of PNRR. So we need to keep the pressure on. We need to work closer together. I think the state needs to listen a little bit more. If I'm giving you a little bit of feedback, so you do listen, but I think we need to come even closer together. And the reason why I'm saying that is that I think we do need to make a few bets, not too many, and really follow through and through, government as well as private sector together. The danger is fragmentation, hyper-fragmentation of all the EU funds. And this should not happen. Romania will be helped if the funds are funneled on specific areas, driven by an industrial strategy agreed by the government as well as the private sector, where both actors will basically focus on it. I think this is what's needed going forward.